That's exactly what this is about. Do you know what I mean? It's like understanding. We see the government headlines, don't we? We see the BSA, and then we hear all the moans from the finances going, "Oh, it's slowing things down," and it is. It's had an impact on everything. We've definitely felt it, in terms of the instruction of major projects, etc. But I think we're climbing out of that. But hopefully climbing out into what is a better workspace, a safer workspace, a more compliant workspace. So do you want us to just carry on?
We just carry on and we'll cool.
So I mean, let's just go back to the beginning. Obviously, we got to know each other working on sort of projects where we've both got our specific roles in there. But what you as yourself, you in the organisation that you're a huge part of, Henrik, in terms of what you do. What is your give me your day to day? What's your mission? Yeah.
Well, I know we've only got 20 minutes. You know what? Actually, a very good question, because I do kind of sit back every now and again now and say, what actually is my sort of role? Because it quickly went from building surveyor, to project manager, to now that kind of director level, as I've got, a small team. So my day to day pretty much now is managing, running the business, the old saying, steering a ship, putting it in the right direction, and, trying to predict what is coming in the future, which is, if anyone's got that skill, then, they'd be worth weight in gold. And that's really what it is. And what I'm trying to do now more is engage with clients, because I think, when you get busy, for want of a better phrase, you churn out your work, don't you? Right, client wants that done. Right, go, done. Yeah, we've done it. On to the next one, I'm just trying to now engage more with clients and say, look, we can write that report for you, and that's happy days. But do you really understand what the report is? What's a better way of doing it? Actually, is it better that we write the report? Because everyone needs a report. But then is it better that we video ourselves explaining what the report is? Maybe there's a video there of the defect, us explaining it, and you can kind of pass that
relevance, on. Right? Because I think what we do, we're both building surveyors in our own disciplines, and what we understand is largely specialist. And we're dealing, and I know, for example, you deal with a lot of landlords, building owners, people like that. They've got an understanding of property per se, but not necessarily the technical inputs that form of it and the relevance of a specific issue to another. So communication, diversity in communication is something that we've discussed here before, and it's very interesting that the people that seem to be doing well have come away from the playbook, if you will, and are going, right, look, how do we make this a more understandable concept? And then taking it from what we've just discussed to a huge arena. If that was the case, broad stroke, I believe, and I'm guessing you do from what you've just said, that would solve so many problems in terms of ongoing management of these risks, high-risk buildings, any building for that matter.
Yeah.
Is that a part of what fixes what is a huge problem in the UK at the moment? And I think it is, but, what's your view there? Do you think that this is something everyone should be doing, or do you think it's just...
100%. I think we should have been doing it earlier. I think we need to do more. I would say we even need to do more on these things, on building safety. For instance, if you have some sort of disability, whatever it may be, and you're not able to get out of a block of flats as quick as other people, but you live in a block of flats that is 10.8 meters high, you don't get the same protection measures as somebody who, just for whatever reason, it was built on a hill and it's just over that 11 meter thing.
Yeah.
You don't get the same protection measures. So why not? And I also say, and this is something that it really bugs me actually, that now our regulations for 18 meter plus building, non-combustible, got to be all non-combustible.
Sure.
But when you're doing works to a building, cladding remediation works, under the FR80W, you could potentially leave some combustible things in there. How does that comply with the building regs?
It's something that grinds my gears and always has, and it becomes down to these whole points, isn't it? That are sort of put in from a huge scope of management. Like, where do we draw the line? Someone said that at some point.
Yeah.
Going, well, 18 meters.
Yeah.
But what about the person at 17.5 meters? What about the people, and how long before we fix that problem? Because it's taken so long now for us to get into a place where we've started to remediate these HRBs under the Department of Levelling Up, etc. And that process is gaining momentum, and it's running now. But it's going to be a big chapter of my career, I would suspect.
Yeah.
But then what? Then do we go phase 2 when we go lower buildings? You know, do we bring that threshold down? Will it take, and I hope not, will it take another incident where many people lose their lives, injured, etc., for that threshold to be lowered? You know, we don't know, do we? And ultimately, we're not in a position to comment. But it's interesting. I think, you know, we talk about this communication, and communication for me forms relationships. And I can hand on heart say that the projects that are most successful for me have some level of relationship attached to them in terms of how we speak. Let's take you and I, for example. We work together in a professional capacity.
Yeah.
But the level of communication that we're able to have might just be, look, I've got this, what do you think? Well, yeah, what about this? And things like that. Whereas if we did it purely through reports, faceless emails, at what point would that communication break down? And I think it's so important.
I think it break down pretty quickly, if I'm honest with you, because I will sit here and say it now that I get so busy that sometimes I skim over a report. I go, right, I know you've sent me a lovely 25-page report. I'm going to read the executive summary because I need to just get a bit of a grasp on it.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then from that executive summary, I can give you a quick 2-minute phone call and say, right, as I understand it, the issues are X, Y, Z. And you go, yeah. And the report is needed 100%. I'm not, I don't want to dumb that down at all. But we just get so busy that, that report isn't necessarily needed for me. That's needed for the end user client. So they've got the full kind of details and full sort of clarity on it all.
Yeah,
definitely. No one likes Teams that much anymore because it's used so much.
It gets abused, doesn't it?
It really is useful on when you've got big projects, cladding remediation projects, again, use an example, big complexities. You've got project managers in it, you've got clerk of works in it, you've got principal contractor, you've got architects, fire engineers, you've got other stakeholders.
Yeah.
Trying to send an email round to all of them is going to break down quickly.
Yeah, and it grows quick, doesn't it?
Trying to get everyone on site at the same time as well is another issue. We've had it a few times. Right, I'm going to be there at 10. All right, I'm not going to be able to sweat. It's not that easy.
Life happens, doesn't it? And I think you're right. The more stakeholders you've got, it's interesting. I'm working on something, and I didn't intend for this to be a pitch towards it, but thanks.
Well, here it comes.
Yeah. So I built a product called Construction Asset Assurance, and what it is effectively a clerk of works model, as we all know and love now, but pumped up. Right. And what it does at the beginning is it really relies on relationships between people like you and me to sit down and go, right, look, Andy, what are your stakeholders here? What are your key stakeholders here? I don't want to step on the project management toes, but ultimately, what are the hold points and what are the key factors to success for those people? And then we bring that into our reporting structure and we measure it so that the project managers can look at it and they can go, well, look, we've got everything, but the clerk of works, I'll pick on myself. The clerk of works hasn't submitted any information for 3 weeks. What's going on there? Yeah. And it's an instant identification within this whole golden thread framework that can be properly managed by people like you and your teams. And we'll talk about that off this, but that's something that I'm pushing out, and it's got a bit of traction recently. But again, it all comes down to the same thing. It's that level of communication, that level of understanding, not just doing my job and throwing it in the pot. But what does Andy need from me? What do I need from Andy? What does the fire engineer need from me? And vice versa, and building that up. So I suppose the next question is, if we had a wish list, what would we do differently to make the industry better? I think it's safe to say that both you and I come from a position where we want to do the best we can with what we've got, and there's certain barriers, etc. But if we could do anything, what do you think the future is? We talked about the BSA being a positive factor. I agree with you. I think the rollout was chaotic, but hopefully we're getting over that now. But within the BSA, I'll give an example to set the tone. I think it's the ability to properly demonstrate and be accounted for within your own discipline. And people actually taking note of that rather than going, we've got a clerk of work, so we tick the box, but we don't really mind what they say. Because it's happened in the past. It happens less now, but it has happened. And it's and for me, that's like being a dog with no teeth. But is there any ideals that you would like to see come into play?
More clarification around competence. What is competence? There's obviously been a lot on LinkedIn and BBC reports on about a fire engineer, some sort of fraudulent activities, etc., etc. Now, a lot of people have appointed that person, that company, and it sort of no longer stands up. Lenders aren't lending against their EWS1 forms. Now, maybe that's a bit of an obsolete one, a bit of a unique one. But the new, is it? I forget the British. Is it BS 9971, the new one for fire risk assessments?
I'll check it.
Yeah, we'll go with it. It's something on that. I forget the things, but within that was a new document came out, and it didn't clarify what qualifications a fire risk assessor should have. Sure. It gave different levels. So there was you could be you could just be someone who does foundation, you could be intermediate, you could be advanced. Yeah. But what actual qualifications do you need? Because I'm a building surveyor, I'm not a fire risk assessor. I know what one looks like and I can have an understanding of it all. But as this moment in time, I could set up tomorrow a business called Andy Banister Fire Risk Assessing and go and be a fire risk assessor.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't have
it's great, isn't it?
I don't have the qualifications for it. I think it's that. I will advocate for the RICS being a chartered building surveyor, but they are it's a regulated firm. It's well known, and you have to go through a process to get onto it. To become a member. Yeah. And I think there's more needed like that. I think much more.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then with that comes an accountability, a level of accountability, and then that needs to be reflected across the board. We talk about our roles, and they are roles, but we've also got careers. Yeah. And within that career, I see a broad stroke of disparity, for want of a better word, where you've got some people that have done, they've got a degree and they've done very well and they're very clever people, but then they get put into an arena where they can't quite cope, and vice versa. You get people with lots of experience, but they don't quite necessarily have the academic backing, if you will, to then follow it through. So I think to sort of focus on back to what you've just said, if there was a definitive level of competency for each role, that would give people a bar, essentially. You take any other industry, take the legal industry, you've got to pass that bar.
Yeah, that's it.
And ultimately, and then that gives, a bit of clarity, but also a nice framework for people to excel through their careers.
I think it helps both sides. It doesn't just help the person appointing you, it helps you. For instance, as a chartered building surveyor, RICS has got many different disciplines you can go through to get chartered. As a chartered building surveyor, you are a bit of a jack of all trades, again, for want of a better expression. But I know that I've done a certain amount of training, and I know if I go up to a building and someone wants me to do, evaluation on it, I can't do it. It's not where my skill set is, sure. and the RICS really kind of drill that into you. As you're going through it all, it's like you've really got to know that. And I think maybe I'm picking on fire risk assessors a little bit too much here, but I use them as another good example. That a fire risk assessor who's just been doing low level, low rise blocks of flats all their life, now all of a sudden gets kind of, with this one instruction, it's an 18-metre plus building, it's got glass curtain wall facades, it's got all sorts going on in it, and they decide to take it on outside of their comfort zone,
Yeah, it might as well be a spaceship at that point.
Exactly.
I think, because you don't understand it, and it's that level of understanding that forms a competency. So I agree with you. Yeah. That's interesting. So what about Andy then? What's Andy got planned? Are you doing MIPIM this year? You getting out?
No, not doing MIPIM this year. We decided to pass up on MIPIM. We're going to do the UK MIPIM of UK Reef. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't describe it UK MIPIM, but we're going to UK Reef. So I went there 2 years ago, kind of sounded it out, went there last year, did a bit more, and we just found it a lot easier to meet people you wanted to meet.
Yeah,
MIPIM, love it, it's great. Who doesn't want a few days in the south of France?
Well, it is fun.
But there's so many people there, and with all of the events that are on, it's a little bit pot luck to who you sort of bump into.
Someone that's able to hear you as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I think interestingly, we've done the same thing. So we're dividing and conquering this year. So our MD's going out to MIPIM, right, and we're tackling some of the UK venues this year.
Yeah,
and I'm looking forward to that. And interestingly, we are working on. Have we done that yet? So I'm going off tangent, but did we get any response from MIPIM in terms of doing the podcast roadshow?
Yeah, I need to speak to James a bit more about that. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So we're going to try and take this on the road a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
So various expos through the UK. So I never know, I might see you there.
Yeah. I think that'd be a good one at UK Reef as well. Yeah, definitely.
I definitely think so. It's high up on the agenda if we can get it, because like you say, the caliber of people that are there, the access to the people, the decision makers, we want to speak. They're exactly the people we want to speak to. They're exactly the people we want to that help the outside world, if you will, for want of a better description, understand what we do.
Yeah.
Because I find it difficult. But, we'll go for drinks, we'll meet new friends, etc. And they go, "What do you do?" And you go, "I'm a child building surveyor." What's that? Sit down, get a pen.
Yeah,
This could take a minute because it's so diverse.
My wife still doesn't know what my actual job is. We did some works at a house about a year ago. There was a bit of an issue with the plumbing afterwards, and she went, "Isn't that your job?" I was like, "No, I'm a building surveyor." "Yeah, but it's buildings, isn't it?" So anything that's within the property is now my job, apparently. If it goes wrong,
you've got the O&M on your own house. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it is, and but isn't it interesting because we actually know our jobs, right? So, and I roughly know what you do, you roughly know what I do, but actually the people that listen to this might be looking at getting into the industry. They might have a different role in the industry. They might be like, "Well, what does that?" This is designed to be informative, a bit of fun, and helpful.
Yeah.
So what might consider sort of run of the mill for you and me is actually very important to someone that might pick this up. So, I'm conscious of your time. I know you're moving offices today, so thanks for coming out of your busy agenda to see us.
That's all right.
Is there anything that you're dying to say to get out there? And bear in mind, we will edit this before it goes, so you don't have to worry about saying something. You know what I mean? But, this is a chance just to reach out and plug whatever.
No, I mean, to be honest, it was what I wanted to say was that with a bit around competence, I think that is really kind of high on people's agenda. We did a panel discussion on one day last week, I can't remember when, called Proper Talk. And one of the questions, quite a few of the questions, and it was mainly aimed at property managers, and their main question was around competence. How do we know that so-and-so is competent to do so-and-so job?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are a bit lost in that. They don't really know where to go, and who are the trade bodies they need to, who are the third-party approving bodies that they go to, because there's so many of them now as well.
Because we do know, but from the outside,
we know, but from learning and speaking to people and going. But if you're mad busy in your day-to-day job and you're like, right, I need some fire stopping works done, you might not know of FIRAS, or you might not know of any contractors, so you speak to your contractor and they put you in touch with so-and-so, and that's how you get a recommendation. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But that's
a factor of risk that could be taken out, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely could be quite easily done. Yeah.
It's interesting actually. I've been asked for a lot more CVs recently. So when we're tendering works, it's like, "Oh, can you send us your CV?"
Yeah.
And I don't know what to put on it, because I can send them my CV. I've got a CV. I've had it since I was 15 or something. But it's not relevant. Borderline relevant. Because it really, if you look at it from a professional achievement perspective, I'm a qualified clerk of works under the Institute of Clerk of Works. As a professional member, I'm a chartered building engineer under CABE. That's really it. Ultimately, there's academic levels underneath that and things like that. But I think a more formalised professional CV template would be more appropriate. If I was able to say, well, I worked on X job and this was a 8-story cladding remediation, blah 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 blah, that would be far more competent. But I don't know whether that's appropriate or not. So it's a funny one, isn't it? I'm not asking for an answer, but it's sort of like, it's all along the same line of delivering competency, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because then I sit back as well and I go, well, if I could do that, that's great. I can demonstrate, multiple high-risk projects where we've successfully delivered them. But then there'll be other people that can't, but that doesn't mean they're not competent. So it's where, I know it's a bit of an off-the-wall statement.
Well, no, actually, I think it's quite a good statement. And actually, you got me thinking that maybe, we've all got to do CPD for all our, our RCS, and we've got to do CPD. So maybe, rather than having to do, the 20 hours of CPD we've got to do for the RICS, where 10 is formal and 10 is informal, and your informal could be you reading the Modus magazine, whatever you're reading up on things.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 hours of the informal could be that every year you have to update your CV with the RICS, and that has to include work that you've done in the past year.
Yeah.
Almost like when you sit your APC and you've got to do a case study on it, it's a little bit similar to that, So, for instance, I've been involved in X project, and my role was to do X, Y, Z. And so people wanting to check out your credentials, there could be an online CV where they could just download and see, right, okay, and maybe there's even, it might be, encroaching in GDPR, but you could put some referrals on there, of people who'd be willing to say, Andrew Banister worked on that project and he did a, absolute sterling job.
Yeah, no,
Like,
absolutely.
you know,
I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea because you get no better experience than practical application.
Yeah.
And not just the experience of the job. The systems don't really change. I won't name them, but you've got your fire stopping, your A1 rated installation, etc., so on and so forth. But the way that it's done by relevant, by different contractors, different subcontractors, that really, from our perspective as a clerk of works, the product doesn't change. It's the application and obviously the substrate.
Yeah.
So that's where the experience comes from. So I think it'd be great to be able to do that, and maybe we can look into that a little bit further, actually.
Yeah. Well, we do it. Sorry, I'm carrying on the conversation now, but we
carry
do
on
it
carry on as long as you want, Andy.
We do it with contractors. When contractors are tendering, again, I use cladding jobs as a good example because they're the big thing at the moment. We want to see, right, who's your site manager? What qualifications have they got? Not just they know how to. They know what a facade should look like, but also like first aid training and things like that.
Yeah.
What qualifications they got? What's your contracts manager? What's their qualifications? What recent CPD have they done? So we really sort of go to town on contractors in terms of making sure they're right for the job. But I suppose really no one goes into that level of detail when they're appointing us. They ask for a fee proposal. We know them most of the time. We're already working with them, have that relationship.
Sure.
But it's we really do scrutinise the contractors on.
And
those
I
things.
think that's the best thing you can do. Ultimately, that preparation at the beginning is what leads to a successful outcome. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The sort of people don't necessarily always question us, perhaps because we've got some letters after our name or whatever that is.
Yeah.
But actually, I'd be more than happy to demonstrate my competence if anyone asks for it. I think it's important. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting
Well,
stuff.
it comes down to, the client at the end has got to appoint a project manager or a building surveyor or someone, and the problem is they might not be. They're busy and they maybe don't know enough about buildings or property.
Yeah.
So that actually they couldn't produce a tender. They couldn't go out and tender to building surveyors because they don't necessarily really know what to ask.
Sure.
So they'll just go, right, okay, they might Google, they might go on RICS and they come up with Earl Kendrick and they say, right, and they phone me and I speak to them and they say, Andy seems to know what he was talking about, and then we win the job and we go forward like that. But then we come in and know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so we scrutinise the contractors and ask this, that and the other in order to get the right job for the client. But that client could
ring someone else.
Ring someone else who maybe doesn't and just goes, sounds like a great job. I'm going to have a bit of a punt at that. I'm going to have a go at it and hopefully I win it.
Yeah, and obviously cost's a factor, isn't it? People, it depends on how it's procured, obviously, but, if someone's got to spend this money for themselves, people don't necessarily recognise actually that the cheapest price is not going to be the best when you get what you pay for. Obviously, we're all quite competitive in the industry, but ultimately, without you being able to give comfort over the phone, and I can relate to that. I do it all the time. People phone me and say, the biggest question I get at the moment is this something you do? Because what we're finding is people are typing in a problem on Google, for example. They're getting picked up by our SEOs or whatever they're called, and they're getting directed to our clerk of works. But then the Googling clerk of works, and they're seeing like the 1800s application of what a clerk of works was. The diversification that's occurred in that sort of century hasn't really transpired through Google. So when they speak to me, it's like, is this what you do, or are you just going to come and kick a wall over? And it's like, no, this is what we do. And probably that leads into a little bit why I've tried to rebrand this model into assurance rather than just clerk of works, because I think we've got to move. I think we've got to, we're in a privileged position in the industry now where actually things are changing. Go with it, don't fight it, develop it, and let's actually try and build on it. And I'll try and finish somewhere around this, but feel free to speak afterwards. The UK, in terms of its industry, is probably in one of the worst positions it's ever been in terms of manufacturing, etc. What we have got is a huge market for development, housing, otherwise. How we're not getting it right is beyond me. If we could get this right, we could have a reputation in the entire world for being the most productive, competent house builder, developing construction industry in the world. And if someone asked me whether could you help with that, and I can't do it on my own. But there's plenty of us out there that would like to see that, and I think let's try and find those people and build a bigger picture. builders,
the big house builders, they do a bad job, and for in some respect they keep me in a job because we go out and do the reports and defect reports and everything else. But if they just did a good job, look, when you're mass producing anything, some things will go wrong. Well, actually, not always the way. How many cars did Toyota produce?
Right.
And how often do they get an issue? And if they do, they recall them. Yeah. They get recalled. And we're looking into these things, and right, we can't do it. Your money back, your new car, whatever it may be. But with housing, it just seems so different.
Well, I think it's industry wide. I go back to, years back, I used to do a lot in housing, and I don't miss it, to be honest. But it was because it was so repetitive, and it was like pulling teeth at times. Prime example being, I would go 3 times a week. So it's 300-400 houses at any one time. Go 3 times a week. You'd take it in clusters, and you'd look at a group of foundations, a group of substructure, and you'd sort of base it out like that. So, like a prime example, happened all the time. In this particular place, which I won't name, there was a site, the one I was involved with, and there was a completely different site about half a mile away on the other side of the road. And we'd go down there on a Monday, there was 2 of us, and we'd go through it, we'd pick out respective bits. And I remember pulling cavity wall ties, they were full of crap, and various other brickwork issues on the sort of first lift. And sat down, spent half an hour with the foreman, bricklaying foreman.
Yeah.
Got through it, right, this is what we'll do, Ben, great. I'll come back on Wednesday, we'll get all this signed off, that'll release you to get the chambers on so you can move. Everyone's happy until we get back on Wednesday, and the foreman's been offered £5 a brick more, and he's took his entire gang and he's moved off the site. Right. It's the way the contract, in that instance, it was the way contracts are procured. There was no continuity. So then I had to have the same conversation with a more senior site manager that was overviewing all of, and you can imagine, that was one instance of what was potentially 3 times a week over the 5 years or whatever it was. It was mental, and to be honest, it didn't really work. No, we had to. We were finding things in retrospect. We were getting told things were done when they weren't. Works were getting completed beyond the whole point that we asked for. Because there's a massive commercial factor. The margins are so tight in house building that they don't want to wait for Ben. Who's Ben? Yeah. But then
we've got to move on with this, guys.
But then your position, and it's so frustrating as a clerk of works, often becomes vindicated after the fact. Well, what's happened here? We've got damp. Yeah, because your cavities are blocked. Yeah. But we didn't know about it. But you did. And that's the power of we talked about report writing in that capacity. It's incredible record keeping. Let's call it. It's incredibly important. Because you're being ignored elsewhere. So it works both ways. That's where I'm trying to go with it. I am aware of some people working at seriously tight margins, and that doesn't allow for failure. There's no capacity in there for an instant beyond control.
You're just going to be looking at things speed. We need to get this done.
Yeah.
If you've allowed 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever for that project, you're going to be like, we can't have a day overrun here. In fact, we need to really shave a bit of time off it. But we've got, and that's where all the issues are.
I agree, and I could go on about this forever. It's a bit of a bee in my bonnet, this, because I think it's a lot to do with design build contracts as well. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. There's some people out there, Andy, they're doing a great job.
Yeah, 100%.
But there's some people winning work on a nominal figure and then just cost engineering it immediately. So you're looking at it. You get the specification that was used for the tender process. As a clerk of works, then you go on site and then you look at the specification. It's been reverse engineered that much that you're thinking, hang on a minute, is this actually going to work? Internal partition walls, the timber is the grade of the timber that's being used for it, and even to the point where the joiners are going, look, what do you want me to do with that? It's all shapes, but that's what they've got. And then we find it. By the time we found it, it's a joinery problem, and then you've got cross package issues. And it gets very messy very quickly. I think we've got a lot to learn from our European colleagues in some respect. I've had a little bit of time working on different aspects, not lots. I'd like to have a lot more, but the organisation, the basic standard, the continuation of standard, seems to be a huge factor in the success of those buildings, and we could just do again there.
Yeah. Agreed.
And on that note, we'll agree.
Yeah, I won't say any more.